The woman who demanded my children call her mom put my daughter in the intensive care unit with a peanut-laced granola bar. And I have the hidden audio recording to prove it was not an accident. My name is Anna, and I am writing this with shaking hands because I just realized that the new wife my ex-husband brought into our lives was not just an entitled stepmother. She was a predator hunting for a $10 million trust fund. She sewed listening devices into the lining of my son's backpack to spy on my private conversations, orchestrating a campaign to paint me as mentally unstable so she could seize custody and access the money. I stood by and watched her buy them gold watches and groom them to despise me, thinking I was taking the high road to keep the peace, but my silence nearly cost my daughter her life. How do you spot a monster when she is wearing a designer dress, holding your ex-husband's hand, and crying fake tears to the doctors while your child stops breathing? I eventually exposed her dark past and destroyed her. But looking at the trauma in my children's eyes, I feel like I lost everything too. Please tell me, was I wrong to ruin her life to save my children? Silence is the most expensive thing I have ever bought. It cost me half of my retirement savings, the equity in a beach house I loved, and 3 years of my life spent arguing with lawyers in sterile conference rooms. But tonight, standing in the kitchen of my single-story bungalow in the hills of San Diego, that silence felt almost worth the price. My name is Anna Miller. I am 40 years old, a landscape architect by trade, and a woman who values structure above all else. In my line of work, I take wild, overgrown, and chaotic plots of land, and I force them into submission. I create lines. I build retaining walls, and I decide exactly where the shadows will fall. I suppose I tried to do the same thing with my marriage. And when I could not prune away the rot, I uprooted the whole tree. It was a Tuesday evening, 7 o'clock. Outside, the Southern California twilight was turning the sky a bruised purple over the Pacific Ocean. Inside, my house was surgically clean. The granite countertop of the kitchen island was cool under my palms. There were no backpacks thrown on the floor, no sneakers by the door, and no teenage arguments bouncing off the high ceilings. My children, Leo, who is 16, and Sarah, who is 14, were with their father for his court-mandated visitation week. I poured myself a glass of Cabernet and took a sip. The wine was heavy and oaky, coating my tongue. I should have been relaxing. I should have been enjoying the solitude that every single mother claims to crave. But my mind was a hive of buzzing anxiety. I unlocked my phone and tapped the Life 360 app. I watched the 2 small digital avatars of my children moving along the freeway, heading toward the sprawling, tacky McMansion that my ex-husband, Mark, now shared with her. Saoting Haoling, 2# is greater than Tiffany. Even thinking her name left a sour taste in my mouth. Worse than corked wine. She was 32, 8 years my junior, with a smile that showed too many teeth and a personality that felt like it had been curated by an algorithm. I placed my phone face down on the counter. I needed to stop checking. I needed to stop obsessing. My therapist told me that my need for control was a trauma response, a way to brace myself for impact. But how could I not brace myself? I knew Mark. He was a weak man, a man who had never made a decision without consulting his mother or me. And now, he was being steered by a woman who treated our children like accessories for her Instagram feed. The phone buzzed against the granite. The sound was like a drill in the quiet room. I ignored it for a moment, swirling the wine in my glass. It buzzed again, A notification, then another. I flipped the phone over. An email had just landed in my inbox. The sender name made my stomach clench. Tiffany Miller. She had taken his last name before the ink on our divorce papers was even dry. The subject line read, "A thought about Mother's Day." My fingers hovered over the screen. Mother's Day was 3 weeks away. It was my weekend. It was always my weekend. The custody agreement was ironclad, written in black and white legal jargon that I had paid $5,000 to finalize. I opened the email. Saoyutsinhaling, Coxie. Hi, Anna. I hope you are finding some time for yourself this week. I know how stressful work can be for you. I was doing some thinking and meditating this morning, and I had a realization I wanted to share. Since the kids are getting older, and our blended family is evolving, I feel like it would be so healing for everyone if we could share Mother's Day this year. I have felt such a profound spiritual connection with Leo and Sarah lately, almost like I have known them in a past life. They really need a mother figure when they are here with us, and I want to step up for them. Also, I was thinking it would be sweet if they started calling me Mom Tiff, or just Mom, to avoid confusion in public. It helps them feel more secure in their identity. Let me know if you are open to this shift in energy. Love and light. Saoyutsinhaling. 2# is greater than Tiffany. I read the email twice. The first time, I felt nothing. The second time, I felt a heat rise up the back of my neck, spreading into my scalp. It was a masterclass in passive aggression. The faux concern for my stress, the spiritual babble to mask the entitlement, the suggestion that my children, who I had carried, I birthed and raised while Mark was busy playing golf and cheating on me. I needed a mother figure, as if I were absent. Confusion in public. I whispered to the empty room. My voice sounded harsh. There was no confusion. I was their mother. She was the woman their father married 6 months after moving out. I set the wine glass down, a little too hard. The red liquid sloshed up the sides. This was how she operated. She pushed boundaries with a smile, wrapped her demands in the language of therapy and wellness. And if you reacted with anger, you were the crazy one. You were the bitter ex-wife. I typed my reply. My thumbs hit the glass screen with force. Tiffany, per the court order, Mother's Day is my custodial time. That will not change. As for what the children call you, they have a mother. I am sure they are comfortable addressing you by your name. Best, Anna. I hit send. It was cold. It was direct. It was the only language a woman like that understood. I tried to return to my evening. I walked into the living room and picked up a stack of blueprints for a client in Del Mar who wanted a drought-resistant garden. I tried to focus on the placement of the agave plants and the stone pathways, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. 10 minutes later, my phone pinged again. This time, it was a notification from Facebook. New post in Hidden Hills Community Association. I knew I should not look. The Homeowners Association page was a cesspool of complaints about unkept lawns, dog waste, and suspicious cars. But a sinking feeling in my gut told me this was relevant. I opened the app, and there it was, right at the top of the feed. Tiffany Miller had posted a photo. It was a picture of her holding a bouquet of white lilies, looking wistfully out a window. The caption was long. Sometimes, being a bonus mom is the hardest job in the world. You give your heart, your soul, and your finances to children who are not your own, only to be blocked by walls of bitterness and ego. It is so sad when biological parents treat children like property instead of people. We just want to love them. Why is love so threatening to some women? Hashtag bonus mom life. Hashtag alienation. Hashtag praying for peace. I stared at the screen until the pixels blurred. She had not named me. She was smart enough to avoid a libel suit. But everyone in the Hidden Hills community knew who she was. They knew she was Mark's new wife. They knew I was the biological parent she was referencing. Below the post, the comments were already rolling in. So sorry you are going through this. Tiff, you are a saint. Some people just cannot move on. Keep your head up. The kids will see the truth eventually. I felt a wave of nausea. She was spinning a narrative in real time. To the outside world, she was the loving, sacrificial stepmother trying to heal a broken family. And I was the cold, gatekeeping obstacle. I wanted to scream. I wanted to type a furiously long comment detailing how she had refused to pick Leo up from soccer practice last week because she had a nail appointment. I wanted to tell them that the finances she mentioned were actually Mark's money. Or rather, the debt Mark was accumulating to keep her happy. But I did not. I knew the rules of this game. If I defended myself, I looked defensive. If I attacked her, I looked aggressive. I put the phone down on the coffee table. The silence of the house was no longer peaceful. It was oppressive. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to stretch longer, darker. This was not just about a holiday. This was not just a petty request for a title. I walked over to the sliding glass door and looked out at my backyard. I had designed it to be a sanctuary, with tall bamboo fences for privacy. But for the first time in years, I felt exposed. Tiffany did not just want to play house. She was testing the perimeter. She was looking for cracks in the foundation. And looking at the way the neighbors were rallying around her victimhood in the comments section, I realized with a cold dread that she had already found one. My children were over there, in her house, sleeping under a roof where I was being painted as the villain. I turned off the lights in the kitchen, plunging the room into darkness. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself she was just a narcissistic, bored housewife looking for validation. But deep down, in the part of my brain that calculated risks and structural integrity, I knew better. The email was a probe. The Facebook post was a signal flare. The war had started, and I was the only one who knew we were on a battlefield. The transition days were always the hardest. They felt less like a family reunion and more like a hostage exchange at a neutral border crossing. I stood by the front window of my living room, peeling back the edge of the linen curtain just enough to see the street. The afternoon sun was baking the asphalt, creating shimmering waves of heat that distorted the view of the quiet cul-de-sac. At exactly 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the sleek black Range Rover pulled into my driveway. It was not Mark's car. Mark drove a sensible sedan when we were married. A car that got good gas mileage and had high safety ratings. This monstrosity belonged to the new life he had purchased on credit. I watched as the doors opened. My son, Leo, stepped out first. At 16, he was all long limbs and awkward angles, trying desperately to grow into the man he thought he should be. Then came Sarah, my 14-year-old daughter, her hair bouncing as she hopped down from the high seat. They did not look like the children I had sent away 2 days ago. When they walked through the front door, the air in the hallway shifted. It smelled of expensive leather and a cloying, floral perfume that lingered on their clothes. It was her scent. She had branded them with it, like a dog marking its territory. Sao Yu Tsing Hao Ling. 2# is greater than hey mom. Leo mumbled the greeting, dropping his heavy duffel bag on the floor with a thud. He kept his head down, avoiding my eyes. That was my first clue. Leo only avoided eye contact when he was hiding something or when he felt guilty. "Hi, sweetie," I said, reaching out to hug him. As he pulled away, something caught the light, a flash of gold on his wrist. I froze. I grabbed his hand, perhaps a little too tightly, and pulled it up to inspect the object. It was a watch, a heavy, gold chronograph with a face the size of a saucer. It looked ridiculous on his teenage wrist, flashy and ostentatious, the kind of thing a used car salesman would wear to look successful. "Where did you get this?" I asked. My voice was calm, but my pulse began to hammer in my throat. Leo pulled his hand back, defensive. "Tiffany gave it to me. It is an early graduation present. She said a man needs to look the part if he wants to be respected." He was a sophomore in high school. Graduation was 2 years away. "It is a bit much for school, do not you think?" I asked, trying to keep the judgment out of my tone. He shrugged, a gesture of teenage indifference that cut deep. "She said you would say that. She said you are afraid of me growing up." The words landed like a slap. They were not Leo's words. I could hear her voice in them, the sugary, poisonous cadence she used to plant seeds of doubt. Before I could respond, Sarah bounced into the room. She was beaming, her face flushed with excitement. "Mom, look," she pointed to her neck. Resting against her collarbone was a delicate silver chain with a heart-shaped pendant. It sparkled under the hallway lights. "It is beautiful, Sarah," I said, forcing a smile. "It opens. Look." She fumbled with the tiny clasp and popped the locket open. Inside, there was a microscopic photo of Sarah and Tiffany, their heads pressed together, smiling like best friends. But it was the engraving on the back of the pendant that made the bile rise in my throat. I leaned in closer to read the script. "Mom's little girl." The room seemed to tilt sideways. Mom's little girl. Tiffany was not her mother. I was the one who had spent 20 hours in labor. I was the one who held her hair back when she had the stomach flu. I was the one who taught her how to read, how to tie her shoes, how to navigate the cruel social hierarchy of middle school. "Who gave you this?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Tiffany," Sarah chirped, oblivious to the knife twisting in my gut. "She said we have a spiritual bond. She said that even though she did not give birth to me, our souls chose each other. Is not that sweet?" It was not sweet, it was theft. It was a calculated rewriting of history. I wanted to reach out and snap the thin chain. I wanted to tell Sarah that she was being bought with trinkets. I wanted to scream that a woman who had known her for 6 months had no right to claim her soul. But I looked at Sarah's face. She looked so happy. She looked validated. If I criticized the gift, I would be the villain. I would be the jealous, bitter mother destroying her joy. That is very generous of her. I managed to say, "The words tasted like ash. Go wash up for dinner." I made lasagna. As they headed to their rooms, my phone rang. It was Mark. I stared at the screen for a long moment. I knew exactly why he was calling. He was calling to check the scoreboard. I swiped the green button and put the phone to my ear. "Hello, Mark? Did the kids get in okay?" His voice boomed. He sounded different lately. Louder, more arrogant. He was trying to project an authority he had never possessed. "Yes, they are here," I said. "Did you see what Tiff got them?" His use of the nickname made my skin crawl. "I saw," I said. "The watch is a bit expensive for a 16-year-old to wear at a public school." "Mark, he could get jumped." "Oh, stop worrying so much, Anna." He scoffed. You always worry. That is your problem. You want to keep them in a bubble. Tiffany thinks Leo needs to learn the value of quality goods. She has such incredible taste. Does not she? I closed my eyes. I could picture him standing in their marble kitchen, puffing out his chest, parroting the lines she had fed him over breakfast. And the necklace? I asked. The one that says, "Mom's little girl"? You do not think that is inappropriate? Silence on the other end. Then, a sigh. You are reading too much into it. Anna, it is just a piece of jewelry. God, why do you have to be so difficult? Tiff is just trying to be nice. She loves those kids. She treats them like her own. You should be grateful someone else cares about them that much. Most stepmoms are wicked witches, right? You got lucky. I got lucky. I tightened my grip on the phone until my knuckles turned white. I am not sure lucky is the word I would use. Mark, whatever. Just make sure they wear them when they come back next week. Tiff will be heartbroken if they do not. She spent a fortune. He hung up without saying goodbye. I stood in the silence of my kitchen, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. I looked down at the granite countertop. My reflection was distorted in the dark stone. I looked calm. I looked collected. But inside, everything was screaming. This was the first crack. It was not a crack in the walls of my house. It was a crack in the loyalty of my children. Tiffany knew exactly what she was doing. She knew she could not win them over with discipline or structure, or the hard, boring work of parenting. So she was buying them. She was dazzling them with gold watches and silver lockets, and the intoxicating idea that they were special, spiritual beings. She was turning parenting into a popularity contest, and she had an endless budget. I walked down the hallway to Leo's room. The door was slightly ajar. I could see him sitting at his desk, staring at the gold watch on his wrist. He was turning it over and over, mesmerized by the way the light caught the heavy metal. He looked like a stranger. I realized then that I was fighting a war on two fronts. I was fighting Tiffany's manipulation, but I was also fighting my children's desire for the shiny, easy life she promised. I went back to the kitchen and opened the drawer where I kept the scissors. For a second, a fleeting, insane second, I thought about going into their rooms while they slept and cutting the necklace off. I thought about smashing the watch with a hammer, but that was what a crazy person would do. And Tiffany was banking on me going crazy. I put the scissors down. I would have to be smarter. I would have to be patient. If she wanted to play the role of the perfect, generous mother, I would let her, because I knew something about people who tried too hard. Eventually, the mask slips. Eventually, the performance becomes exhausting. And when she slipped, when the veneer of love and light cracked to reveal the rot underneath, I would be there. I walked over to the trash can and pressed the foot pedal. I stared into the garbage. Deep down, amidst the coffee grounds and vegetable peelings, lay the remains of my trust in Mark. I needed to see what else she had given them. I waited until I heard the shower running in the bathroom. Sarah was singing a pop song, her voice echoing against the tiles. Leo was in his room with headphones on, gaming. I slipped into the mudroom where they had left their backpacks. My heart was racing. I felt like a criminal in my own home. I unzipped the main compartment of Leo's bag. Textbooks, gym clothes that smelled of sweat, a bag of chips. Then I saw it. Tucked into the side pocket was a small, velvet pouch. It matched the box the watch had come in. I opened it. Inside was a receipt. I unfolded the crinkled paper. It was from a pawn shop in downtown San Diego. Gold-plated chronograph. $200. I frowned. Mark had said she spent a fortune. Leo thought it was solid gold. I checked the date. It was purchased 3 days ago. I put the receipt back. A small smile touched my lips, but it did not reach my eyes. It was fake, just like her. She was buying their affection with discount jewelry and passing it off as heirloom quality. This was a red flag. A small, fluttering warning sign. Why would a woman who lived in a multi-million-dollar mansion, who bragged about her wealth, buy a pawn shop watch for her stepson? Unless she did not have the money she pretended to have, or unless she thought my son was too stupid to know the difference. I zipped the bag back up. The crack had appeared, but now I saw something else. I saw a loose thread, and I was going to pull on it until the whole tapestry unraveled. Saturday morning arrived with the deceptive brightness of a postcard. The sun streamed through the plantation shutters of my home, casting long, striped shadows across the hardwood floors. It was a cleaning day. My children were at soccer practice with the carpool, giving me a 2-hour window to scrub away the grime of the week and restore the order that kept my anxiety at bay. I started in Leo's room. Teenage boys are creatures of distinct olfactory habits. His room smelled of stale corn chips, Axe body spray, and the rubbery scent of unwashed sneakers. I moved mechanically, picking up discarded socks and straightening the stack of comic books on his nightstand. I was not snooping. I was maintaining the habitat. There is a fine line between invasion of privacy and maternal due diligence, and I like to think I walked it with grace. I reached for the new hiking backpack that Tiffany had given him. It was slumped in the corner near his closet, a high-tech monstrosity of ballistic nylon and excessive zippers. It was black and neon orange, branding itself as equipment for serious mountaineers. Though the steepest hill Leo had ever climbed was the driveway, I grabbed the top handle to move it onto the bed so I could vacuum the carpet underneath. It was heavy. I frowned. I had emptied it yesterday. I had shaken out the crumbs and removed the gym clothes. It should have been light as a feather. I placed it on the mattress. The bed springs creaked under the weight. I unzipped the main compartment. It was empty. The dark interior gaped back at me, a void of black nylon. I checked the front pocket, empty. I checked the side mesh pockets, meant for water bottles. Nothing. My architect's brain began to whir. Mass cannot exist without matter. If the bag was heavy, something was inside it. I ran my hands along the bottom of the bag. The fabric felt thick, padded. I pressed down with my thumbs. There was a resistance. It was not the uniform squish of foam padding. It was hard, rectangular, and it was localized in the center of the base, beneath the lining. I pulled the lining fabric up, squinting in the sunlight. The stitching along the bottom seam was black, blending perfectly with the factory hem, but to my eye, trained to spot the difference between a natural vine and an artificial wire, it looked wrong. The tension was too tight. The thread was slightly glossier than the matte finish of the rest of the bag. Someone had opened this seam and sewn it back up. A cold prickle of unease started at the base of my spine. It was the same feeling I got when I walked onto a job site and realized the soil was unstable, liable to collapse under the weight of a structure. I went to my desk down the hall and retrieved a small utility knife I used for cutting drafting paper. The metal casing felt cold and clinical in my hand. I returned to Leo's room, the silence of the house suddenly feeling amplified. I sat on the edge of his bed and positioned the blade over the stitching. With a surgical precision, I sliced through the glossy black thread. 1 snip, 2 snips. I pulled the fabric apart. buried within the foam padding of the bag's false bottom, wrapped tightly in electrical tape, was a small, black device. It was no larger than a pack of gum. Beside it, taped securely to the plastic casing, was a white Apple AirTag. I stared at them for a long moment. My brain refused to process what I was seeing. I peeled the electrical tape back. The black device had a small screen and a red light that was currently blinking. A digital voice recorder. I pressed the button on the side. The screen illuminated. Recording. Haling. 2# is greater than 14 hours, 22 minutes. The air left my lungs in a sharp rush. It was still recording. My hands began to tremble. I pressed the stop button. Then I pressed play. A tinny, muffled sound filled the quiet room. Haling. 2# is greater than. Can you pass the salt? Mom? Leo's voice. Distant, but clear. Did you finish your history essay? That was my voice. I sounded tired. Yeah, mostly. Dad said he would help me with the rest next week. Well, make sure he actually helps you and does not just write it for you. You need to learn the material. Leo, I know. Mom, God, you are so intense. I pressed stop. I sat there, frozen. The sunlight on the floor no longer looked warm. It looked like a spotlight in an interrogation room. This was not a mistake. This was not a misplaced gadget. Tiffany had sewn a listening device into my son's backpack. She was listening to our dinner conversations. She was listening to me nag him about homework. She was listening to the private, mundane, intimate moments of our lives inside the walls of my own home. Nausea rolled over me in a violent wave. I dropped the recorder onto the bedspread as if it were a venomous spider. The AirTag was for tracking his location. That was intrusive. Yes, but perhaps justifiable in the warped mind of an anxious parent. But the recorder? That was a felony. California is a two-party consent state. You cannot record people without their knowledge. She was breaking the law. Haling. 2# is greater than Y. The answer came to me with terrifying clarity. She was mining for data. She was looking for leverage. She wanted to catch me slipping up. She wanted a recording of me yelling, or cursing, or saying something negative about Mark, so she could play it for a judge, or a mediator, or just for Mark, to prove that I was the unstable, bitter harpy she claimed I was. She was baiting me in real life and recording the reaction. I stood up, my legs feeling weak. I needed to check Sarah. I ran down the hallway to my daughter's room. It was a sanctuary of lavender walls and fairy lights. Her school bag, a canvas tote with a floral print, was hanging on the back of her chair. I dumped the contents onto the floor. Notebooks, lip gloss, a tangled pair of earbuds. I turned the bag inside out. There was no false bottom here. I felt a surge of relief, followed immediately by a surge of suspicion. Tiffany was thorough. She would not leave Sarah out. I checked the side pocket. Nothing. Then I saw the plush keychain dangling from the zipper. It was a fluffy, white unicorn. Another gift from Mom Tiff. I squeezed the unicorn's stomach. It was hard. I did not hesitate. I used the utility knife to slice open the unicorn's belly. Spilling synthetic stuffing onto the carpet, there it was. A smaller recorder. This one voice activated. Nestled deep inside the fluff, I pulled it out. My fingers were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I was living in a glass house. Every word I had spoken in the presence of my children for the last week, every sigh, every complaint, Every moment of vulnerability had been captured, stored, and likely analyzed by the woman who wanted to replace me. I gathered the devices, the 2 recorders, and the AirTag, and shoveled them into my pocket. I could not leave them here. I could not let the children know I had found them. Not yet. If I confronted them, they would tell Mark. Mark would tell Tiffany, and Tiffany would spin it. She would say I planted them, or she would say she did it for their safety because I was negligent. I needed to get out of the house. I grabbed my car keys and walked out the front door, locking it behind me. My hands were slick with sweat. I got into my sports utility vehicle and locked the doors. The heavy thunk of the locks engaging usually made me feel safe. Today, it felt like I was sealing myself in a coffin. I drove. I did not know where I was going. I just drove up the coast, watching the ocean blur past my window. I pulled over at a scenic overlook near Torrey Pines. The ocean was a vast, indifferent blue. I took the devices out of my pocket and set them on the dashboard. They looked so innocuous, just plastic and silicone, but they represented a violation so profound I felt like I had been physically assaulted. I picked up the recorder from Leo's bag again. I needed to know what else was on there. I put the earbuds in and hit play, skipping backward to the day before. I heard the sounds of the school cafeteria, trays clattering, boys laughing, 小雨静好, Ling. 2 hashes greater than so my stepmom. She is actually pretty cool. Leo was saying, he must have been talking to a friend. Yeah? Another voice asked. Yeah, she bought me this watch, and she listens. You know, my mom, 小雨静好Ling. 2 hashes greater than she is, always just focused on grades and cleaning and stuff. Tiff is like, 小雨静好Ling. 2 hashes greater than she wants to know who I am. Tears pricked my eyes. Hot, stinging tears. It hurt to hear him say that. But what hurt more was knowing that Tiffany had heard it too. She had listened to this. She had probably smiled that predatory smile of hers, validated in her belief that she was winning. I fast-forwarded. I heard the sound of a car door closing. Mark's voice. Did you turn it on? Mark asked. Hush. Honey, it is voice activated. Tiffany's voice whispered. It was crystal clear. They must have been testing it before giving the bag to Leo. Are you sure about this? Mark sounded nervous. Is it legal? Stop being such a coward. Mark. Tiffany snapped. Her voice lost all its public sweetness. It was jagged and cruel. Do you want custody or not? Do you want control of the trust fund or not? We need proof that she is unfit. We need her to sound crazy. If we can get her screaming at them, we win. The judge will have no choice. The trust fund. The world stopped spinning. I pressed pause. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. The trust fund? My father-in-law, Mark's father, had passed away 5 years ago. He was a stern, successful man who never trusted Mark with money. He had set up a trust for the grandchildren, Leo and Sarah, $10 million. But the terms were strict. Mark could not touch the principal. The money was locked away until the children turned 25. However, there was a loophole regarding the guardian's allowance. I remembered the lawyer explaining it vaguely during the divorce, but I had been too focused on retaining the house to pay close attention. Who has control of the trust fund? Tiffany did not want to be a mother. She did not care about Leo's soul or Sarah's heart. She was chasing $10 million, and to get access to that administration fee, which was likely a percentage of the total assets, she needed full custody, or at least the majority of the custody She needed to destroy me to get to the bank vault. I looked at the recorder in my hand. It was no longer just a violation of privacy. It was a smoking gun. She had admitted it. She had admitted the motive and the crime on her own device. A laugh bubbled up in my throat. It was a hysterical, jagged sound. She was so arrogant. She was so convinced of her own intelligence that she had recorded her own conspiracy. She had handed me the weapon I needed to kill her carefully constructed persona, but I could not use it yet. If I went to the police now, she might wiggle out of it. She might claim Mark did it. She might claim it was a joke. I needed more. I needed to let her think she was succeeding. I needed to let her dig the hole deeper until she could not climb out. I wiped the tears from my face. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. My eyes were red, but the fear was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I was a landscape architect. I knew how to deal with invasive species. You do not just cut them back. You have to locate the root system, dig it out completely, and burn it. I took the AirTag and the recorders. I could not put them back. She would know I found them if the recording stopped or the location went dark. I had an idea. I started the car. I drove to the local animal shelter where I sometimes volunteered. I walked into the lobby and found the donation bin for old blankets and toys. I took the AirTag, the one tracking Leo's location, and I slipped it deep into the lining of a dog bed that was about to be donated to a foster family in Chula Vista, 30 miles south. Let her track that. Let her drive 30 miles to find her precious device in a garage full of pit bull puppies. As for the recorders, I kept them. I would download the files to a secure cloud drive, then destroy the hardware. I drove home. The house was still quiet, but it no longer felt like a victim's home. It felt like a fortress. I walked into the kitchen and poured the rest of the wine down the sink. I needed a clear head. Tiffany Miller wanted a war. She wanted to play dirty. She had no idea. I pulled out my laptop and opened a new file. I named it Project Weed Control. The first entry was simple. Item 1. The trust fund clause. Verify with the state attorney on Monday. I closed the laptop. I was not just Anna Miller, the bitter ex-wife anymore. I was the guardian of the gate, and the wolf was already at the door. But she did not know I had found her paw print. The call came at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I was standing on a construction site in La Jolla, arguing with a contractor about the grade of the retaining wall. The sun was beating down on my hard hat, and the air was thick with the smell of wet concrete and sawdust. My phone vibrated against my hip. I pulled it out, annoyed at the interruption. The screen read, Valley View Middle School, Nurse Office. The irritation vanished, replaced instantly by a cold, hollow dread that dropped into my stomach like a stone. I swiped the answer button. This is Anna Miller. I said, Miss Miller, this is the school nurse. You need to get to Sharp Memorial Hospital immediately. Sarah has gone into anaphylactic shock. The world went silent. The jackhammers, the shouting workers, the wind coming off the ocean. It all just stopped. Is she breathing? I asked. My voice sounded like it was coming from someone else. Someone miles away. The paramedics had to intubate her in the ambulance. The nurse said, her voice tight with professional panic. She ingested peanuts. It was a severe reaction. We used the epinephrine pen, but it was not enough. I dropped the blueprints I was holding into the dirt. I did not even watch them fall. I ran to my truck. I drove down the Interstate 5 like a maniac, weaving through the heavy traffic, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers ached. Soyutsing Haoling, 2 hashes greater than peanuts. My mind was racing, replaying the morning on a loop. I had made her lunch. I always made her lunch. A turkey sandwich on whole wheat, sliced cucumbers, a gala apple, a bottle of water. I knew Sarah's allergy. It was not a mild sensitivity. It was a death sentence. We had lived with this fear since she was 3 years old. I did not keep peanuts in the house. I checked every label. I interrogated waiters at restaurants. I was a hawk. I was a fortress. How did this happen? By the time I sprinted into the emergency room lobby, my shirt was stuck to my back with sweat. I slammed my hand on the reception desk. Sarah Miller. I gasped. My daughter, where is she? The receptionist typed slowly, too slowly. Room 304. She is stable. Ma'am, her parents are already with her. Her parents? I froze. The words hit me harder than the sliding glass doors. I walked down the sterile hallway. The smell of antiseptic and floor wax made my head spin. I found room 304. The curtain was pulled back. I saw the tableau before I stepped inside. It looked like a scene from a medical drama, perfectly lit and staged. Sarah was lying in the hospital bed, looking small and pale. An oxygen mask was strapped to her face, and an intravenous line ran into her arm. Her eyes were closed. Mark was standing on the left side of the bed, his face red and blotchy, and there, sitting on the edge of the bed, holding Sarah's hand, was Tiffany. She was stroking Sarah's forehead with a tenderness that looked rehearsed. She was whispering something I could not hear. She looked like the grieving mother. She looked like the angel of mercy. I stepped into the room. The air shifted. Get away from her, I said. It was a growl. Tiffany looked up. Her eyes were wide and shimmering with tears. She did not look angry. She looked disappointed. She looked pitiful. Oh, Anna, she breathed. Thank God you are here. We almost lost her. She did not move. She did not let go of Sarah's hand. What happened? I demanded, looking at Mark. Why is she here? Mark turned to me. His eyes were not filled with relief to see me. They were filled with rage. You tell us. Anna, he shouted. The noise made Sarah flinch in her sleep. You packed her lunch. I stepped back, as if he had physically shoved me. I packed a turkey sandwich, I said, my voice trembling. I packed cucumbers and an apple. There were no peanuts. There are never peanuts. The doctor walked in then, holding a clipboard. He looked tired. We found the source, the doctor said. He held up a plastic Ziploc bag. Inside was the wrapper of a granola bar. I stared at it. It was a brand I recognized. Nature's Crunch. Peanut butter and honey. We found this in her lunchbox, the doctor said. She took 2 bites before her throat closed up. I shook my head. The room was spinning. I did not pack that. I whispered, I have never bought those in my life. I know she is allergic. I would never. So Jing Hao Ling. Or Jing Hao Dayu. Mark stepped forward, getting into my personal space. I could smell the stale coffee on his breath. She said you gave it to her. Mark spat. She told the paramedics. She said Mom put a treat in my lunchbox today. No, I said. I felt the tears coming now, hot and stinging. No, that is a lie. I did not. Tiffany stood up then. She walked around the bed and placed a hand on Mark's arm, a gesture of calming the beast. Mark, honey, do not yell, she said softly. Her voice was like velvet. Anna is obviously stressed. She has been working so many hours. Mistakes happen. She turned to me, her expression full of a sickening pity. Anna, look, I know you are overwhelmed. Being a single mom is so hard. Maybe you just grabbed the wrong box at the pantry. Maybe you were tired. We are not trying to blame you. We just want Sarah to be safe. She was doing it. She was rewriting reality right in front of me. I do not buy peanut butter granola bars. I screamed. The sound echoed off the linoleum tiles. Mark grabbed my arm. Lower your voice. He said, you are making a scene. You almost killed our daughter. And now you are screaming in a hospital? I looked at Tiffany. She was watching me over Mark's shoulder. For a split second, just a fraction of a heartbeat, the mask slipped. The corner of her mouth twitched upward. It was a micro-expression of pure, unadulterated triumph. She had done this. She must have switched the snack. She had access to the backpacks when the kids were at her house. Or maybe she slipped it in this morning before school? No, the kids were with me this morning. So Yu Jinghao Ling. Dua. How? My mind raced. Yesterday, Sarah had left her lunchbox in the car when Mark dropped them off. He had come to the door to drop off her cleats. Did he have access? No. Wait, the carpool. This morning, Tiffany had driven the carpool because the usual mom was sick. She had picked Sarah up at my curb. Sarah had her lunchbox. Tiffany had 5 minutes alone with Sarah and the other kids in the car. Sarah, honey, here is a special treat for later. Do not tell your mom. It is a surprise. I could hear her saying it. I could hear the sweet, conspiratorial tone. You did this, I said, pointing a shaking finger at Tiffany. You gave this to her. You drove the carpool this morning, Tiffany gasped, her hand flying to her chest. Me? She cried. Her voice cracked perfectly. Anna, how can you say that? I love Sarah. I would die for her. Why would I hurt her? She is projecting, Mark said, disgusted. He looked at me with a coldness I had never seen before. He looked at me like I was a monster. You are sick. Anna, you cannot even take responsibility for your own negligence. You would rather blame Tiffany than admit you screwed up. I am not blaming her. I am telling you the truth. She wants to make me look bad. Mark laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. Make you look bad? You put our daughter in the intensive care unit. You did that all by yourself. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. I am calling our lawyer in the morning, Anna, and I am calling Child Protective Services. The blood drained from my face. Child Protective Services? This is endangerment. Mark said, you are unstable. You are forgetting things. You are paranoid. And now, you are nearly killing our child. I cannot let them stay with you if you are losing your mind. Tiffany stepped up beside him, slipping her arm through his. They stood as a united front, a wall of judgment. Maybe it is for the best. Anna, Tiffany said softly, just for a while. Until you get some help, we can take the kids. They will be safe with us. I check every label. The trap snapped shut. I looked at Sarah, sleeping fitfully in the bed. I wanted to run to her. I wanted to shake her awake and ask her who gave her the bar, but I knew I could not. If I woke her up, if I agitated her, they would have me escorted out by security. They would write it in the report. Mother erratic, mother aggressive. I was cornered. I backed away toward the door. My legs felt like they were made of lead. I did not do this, I said again, but my voice was a whisper. It lacked conviction because a tiny, insidious voice in the back of my head was whispering, Did you buy a variety pack by mistake? Did you grab something from the wrong shelf? You were tired this morning. You were rushing. Is it possible? No, it was not possible, But looking at their faces, Mark's righteous anger, Tiffany's sorrowful concern, I felt the ground crumbling beneath me. I turned and walked out of the room. I walked past the nurse's station. I walked out the automatic doors into the blinding afternoon sun. I sat on the curb of the ambulance bay and buried my face in my hands. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. I was an architect. I dealt in measurements, in concrete, in absolutes. But my reality was being warped. The lines were bending. Tiffany had just played her strongest card. She had not just attacked my character. She had attacked my competence as a mother. She had hurt Sarah to get to me. The horror of that realization made me want to vomit. She had risked Sarah's life for a custody battle. Or was I crazy? Was I the one who was losing it? I closed my eyes and tried to picture the pantry shelf. I tried to see the boxes, but the image was fuzzy. Gaslighting is not just lying. It is dismantling someone's trust in their own senses. And sitting there on the dirty concrete, listening to the wail of sirens in the distance, I realized that Tiffany was not just stealing my children. She was stealing my mind. The office of my family law attorney, Robert Sterling, smelled of old paper and expensive cologne. It was a smell I associated with failure. I sat in the leather chair, my hands clasped tightly in my lap to stop them from trembling. The morning sun was filtering through the blinds, slicing the room into bars of light and shadow, but I felt only a pervasive chill. Robert slid a thick manila folder across the mahogany desk. His face was grave. Mark filed the emergency motion this morning. "Anna," he said. His voice was soft, the kind of tone used by doctors delivering terminal diagnoses. "He is asking for full temporary custody pending a psychological evaluation. He is citing the anaphylactic incident as evidence of gross negligence and potential endangerment." I stared at the folder. It looked heavy. It looked like a tombstone. "He cannot do that," I whispered. "It was an accident. I did not put that bar in her lunch." Robert took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "It does not matter what you did or did not do, Anna. It matters what they can prove. And right now, the narrative is that you are an overwhelmed, possibly unstable woman who nearly killed her daughter. They have the medical report. They have the statement from the school. And they have Tiffany, who is presenting herself as the responsible, vigilant stepmother who saved the day." I felt a flash of heat behind my eyes. "She is lying, Robert. She planted it, Robert Sehill. We have no proof of that. Anna, if you go into court and accuse the stepmother of poisoning the child without hard evidence, the judge will order a psychiatric hold on you faster than you can blink. You will lose everything." I sat back, the leather creaking under my weight. I felt cornered. I felt like an animal trapped in a snare, the wire tightening with every breath. "I need time," I said. "You have 48 hours until the hearing." Robert replied, "Unless we find a smoking gun. I advise you to prepare for a reduced visitation schedule." I walked out of his office into the blinding San Diego heat. The world looked too bright, too loud, too normal. People were walking their dogs, buying coffee, living lives that had not been dismantled by a sociopath. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel. I could not go home. Home was where the memories were. Home was where I had failed to protect my children. I needed clarity. I needed to stop reacting and start hunting. My phone buzzed. It was an incoming email from the private investigator I had hired 3 days ago. A man named Henderson who operated out of a strip mall in Escondido. I had paid him a $2,000 retainer to dig into Tiffany's past. The subject line read, Report on Subject T. Miller. I opened the attachment on my phone. The first page was a photograph. It was a mugshot. The woman in the picture looked younger, harder. Her hair was bleached, a cheap, brassy blonde, and she was not smiling, but the eyes were the same, cold, predatory. Name, Tiffany Vance, alias Tiffany Stone. Tiffany Miller. Location, Las Vegas, Nevada. Offense, check fraud, grand larceny, charges dismissed. I scrolled down, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Civil judgments, 4 outstanding liens from the Wynn Casino and Caesar's Palace. Total debt, $450,000. I gasped. The number was staggering. Nearly $500,000 in gambling debt. I read on. The report detailed a history of financial ruin, evictions, repossessions. She had fled Nevada 2 years ago, right around the time she met Mark at a conference in Phoenix. She was not a wealthy heiress. She was not a successful interior designer. As she claimed, she was a grifter. She was running from sharks, and she had found a guppy in Mark. But Mark did not have that kind of money. Mark made a decent salary, but he was mortgaged to the hilt for that monstrosity of a house they bought. He was drowning in credit card debt to maintain her lifestyle. So where was the payoff? Why was she trying so hard to take the children? Child support payments would help, but they would not cover $500,000 in casino markers. There had to be something else. I drove home. I did not feel the road beneath the tires. My mind was a fever of connections. I ran into my house and went straight to the attic. The air up there was stiflingly hot and smelled of dust and cedar. I pulled down the heavy plastic bin labeled Estate Documents. I dug through the files until I found the thick binder bound in blue leather. The Archibald Miller Family Trust. Mark's father had been a titan of industry, a man who believed in generational wealth but had zero faith in his son's ability to manage it. When he died, he bypassed Mark almost entirely, leaving the bulk of his estate to Leo and Sarah. I flipped through the dense legal jargon, scanning for the distribution clauses. Article 7, Section C. My finger traced the line. The corpus of the trust, valued at $10 million, shall remain in a protected account until the beneficiaries reach the age of 25. I knew that part, but I needed to read the fine print about the trustees. However, the document continued. In the event that the primary custodial parent demonstrates a financial hardship or deems it necessary for the welfare of the beneficiaries, said guardian may petition for an annual administrative allowance not to exceed 5% of the total principal, along with a monthly stipend for housing and maintenance appropriate to the station of the beneficiaries. I did the math in my head. 5% of $10 million, $500,000 per year, plus a housing stipend, and the kicker was in the next paragraph. Control of these disbursements shall be granted solely to the guardian who holds physical custody of the beneficiaries for more than 50% of the calendar year. The book fell from my hands and hit the floor with a dull thud. There it was, the motive, the engine driving the entire machine. Tiffany did not want children. She hated children. I had heard it in her voice on the recording when she snapped at Mark. She wanted the keys to the vault. If she could prove I was unfit, if she could get full custody for Mark, she would become the de facto manager of the children's lives. She could petition the trust for the administrative allowance. She could pay off her gambling debts in 1 year. She was willing to destroy my life, traumatize my children, and even risk Sarah's life with a peanut allergy reaction. All for a payday. I sat on the dusty floorboards of the attic. A strange sensation washed over me. The fear vanished. The anxiety that had been eating a hole in my stomach for weeks suddenly evaporated. In its place, something cold and hard settled in my chest. It felt like steel. For months, I had been playing defense. I had been reacting to her moves, trying to prove I was a good mother, trying to be reasonable, trying to keep the peace. I had been a victim. I stood up. I wiped the dust from my hands. I walked downstairs to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. My face was pale. My eyes were rimmed with red. I looked like a woman on the edge of a breakdown. That was exactly what she wanted to see. I turned on the faucet and splashed cold water on my face. I scrubbed away the tear tracks. I brushed my hair until it shone. I picked up my phone and dialed the investigator. "Henderson," I said. My voice was steady. It did not shake. "Miss Miller, did you get the report?" I did. "It is excellent work. What do you want to do?" he asked. "Do we take this to the police?" "No," I said. "Not yet. Being in debt is not a crime, and using a fake name socially is not illegal. If I show this to Mark now, she will spin it. She will say it is her past, that she is a victim of addiction, that she has changed. Mark is so brainwashed, he will pay off her debts just to be her hero. Then what? I need more." I said, "I need to catch her in the act. I need to prove she is a danger to the children." I hung up. I walked into the kitchen. The sun was setting now, casting long, bloody streaks across the sky. I looked at the empty spot on the counter where the children's lunchboxes usually sat. She had made a mistake, a fatal one. She thought I was weak. She thought I was just a suburban mom who would crumble under the pressure of social shame and legal threats. She thought she was the predator, and I was the prey. She had forgotten one thing. I was a mother, and I was an architect. I knew how to build things, but I also knew how to demolish them. I knew where the load-bearing walls were. I was going to let her think she had won. I was going to let her take the kids for the temporary custody. I was going to let her feel the weight of the crown she so desperately wanted, because I knew something about Tiffany Vance. She was an addict, and addicts get sloppy when they think they have hit the jackpot. I opened my laptop and started a new folder. I named it The Demolition. I dragged the audio files from the backpack into it. I dragged the portable document format file of the trust fund into it. I dragged the investigator's report into it. Then I typed a list. 1. Install hidden cameras in the children's clothing. 2. Contact the estate trustee directly and quietly alert them to a potential fraud attempt. 3. Wait for the meltdown. I closed the laptop. I poured myself a glass of water. My hand was steady as a rock. The crying was over. The begging was over. She wanted to be their mother? Fine. I would let her try. And when the weight of it crushed her, when she reached for that money and realized I had cut the wires, I would be there to watch the lights go out in her eyes. I took a sip of water. It was cool and refreshing. Let the games begin. The estate of my former in-laws in Rancho Santa Fe was less a home and more a monument to old money and quiet judgment. It was a sprawling Spanish colonial mansion sitting on 3 acres of manicured lawn, surrounded by eucalyptus trees that smelled of menthol and dry earth. I had not set foot on this property in 2 years, not since the divorce was finalized. But today was the joint birthday party for Mark's father and, conveniently, a celebration of the new family unit. I was not invited as a guest. I was permitted to attend as a chaperone, a concession my lawyer had wrung out of Mark after the peanut allergy incident. I was allowed to be present, but I was expected to be invisible. I stood near the edge of the patio, holding a glass of sparkling water I had no intention of drinking. I wore a simple navy dress, armor designed to deflect attention. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and the low hum of polite conversation. Waiters in white jackets moved like ghosts through the crowd, offering crab cakes and champagne to women with frozen foreheads and men in pastel polo shirts. Everywhere I looked, I saw her touch. Tiffany had planned this. The centerpieces were not the traditional wildflowers my mother-in-law loved. They were towering, aggressive arrangements of white orchids and ostrich feathers. A live string quartet played pop covers in the corner. It was ostentatious. It was a performance. And there she was, holding court in the center of the garden. Tiffany wore a white dress that looked suspiciously bridal. She was laughing, her head thrown back, her hand resting possessively on Mark's arm. Mark looked flushed, a little too loud, a little too eager to please the parents who had always looked at him with disappointment. My stomach churned. I scanned the crowd for my children. I found them sitting at a table near the stage. Sarah was wearing a dress that was too young for her, something with frills and lace that made her look like a oversized doll. Leo was stuffed into a beige linen suit that looked itchy. They both stared at their plates, looking like prisoners of war, awaiting interrogation. I wanted to run to them. I wanted to drag them out of this masquerade and drive them to the beach, where we could eat tacos and breathe real air. But I remained rooted to the spot. I had to play the long game. I had to let the scene play out. The music faded. A hush fell over the garden as Tiffany stepped onto the small, raised stage that had been erected near the fountain. She tapped the microphone. Thump, thump. The sound echoed off the stucco walls. "Hello, everyone," Tiffany cooed. Her voice was smooth, practiced. The voice of a woman who had rehearsed this moment in front of a mirror 1,000 times. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate Dad's 75th birthday. But before we cut the cake, we have a little surprise, a special tribute to the power of family and how love can grow in the most unexpected places." She gestured toward the table where my children sat. "Leo, Sarah, come up here." My loves, my heart hammered against my ribs. This was not in the schedule. Leo did not move. He stared at the tablecloth. Sarah looked terrified, her eyes darting toward me across the lawn. I nodded slightly. A silent signal. "Go. Endure it. It will be over soon." Slowly, painfully, they stood up. They walked to the stage like they were walking to the gallows. Tiffany beamed. She put an arm around Sarah's shoulders and pulled her close. Too close. Then she handed a piece of heavy cardstock paper to Leo. "Leo has written something very special," Tiffany announced. She looked at the crowd, her eyes shimmering with manufactured emotion. Blending families is hard work. It takes patience. It takes grace. But when I hear my bonus children speak from their hearts, I know it is all worth it. Go ahead, Leo. She shoved the microphone into my son's hand. Leo looked at the paper. His hands were shaking. I could see the sweat beading on his forehead even from this distance. "Read it," Tiffany whispered. She moved the microphone away from her mouth, but in the silence of the garden, the command carried. Leo cleared his throat. He looked at the paper. "Dear, saluting Ha Ling," 2 hashes greater than his voice cracked. He swallowed hard. "Dear Mom Tiff." A ripple of cooing went through the crowd. "Ah, how sweet." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. "Mom Tiff," Leo continued, his voice monotone, robotic. "Thank you for coming into our lives. Thank you for showing us what it means to be a real family. Thank you for fixing what was broken and for loving us when Sao Ting Haoling. 2 hash is greater than when things were hard. He stopped. He stared at the next line. I saw his jaw tighten. I saw the muscle in his cheek jump. Tiffany nudged him. Read it. She hissed through her smile. Leo looked up. He looked out at the sea of strangers. Then, his eyes found mine. I was standing in the shadows of the pergola. I did not look away. I did not shake my head. I just looked at him with everything I had, trying to send him a lifeline of strength. I am here. You are safe. You know the truth. Leo looked back at the paper. Thank you for being the mother we never had. He read. The silence that followed was heavy. That was the line. That was the bridge too far. Leo stopped breathing. He looked at Mark, who was standing in the front row, grinning like a fool, oblivious to his son's torment. Then he looked at Tiffany. She was staring at him with a hard, expectant glint in her eyes. It was a look of pure coercion. Leo lowered the paper. No, he said. It was quiet, but the microphone picked it up perfectly. Tiffany's smile faltered. What did you say, sweetie? I said no, Leo said. His voice was getting louder, stronger. He crumbled the heavy cardstock in his hand. I am not reading this, he said. I did not write this. You wrote it. A gasp went through the audience. Someone dropped a fork. It clattered against a china plate with a sharp ting. Leo turned to face her. All the teenage awkwardness was gone. In that moment, he looked like a man. He looked like me. You are not my mother. Leo said. The words rang out, clear and devastating. You are not my savior. And we were not broken before you got here. He pointed a shaking finger at me. That is my mother, he said. Anna is my mother. You are just the lady my dad married. Tiffany stood frozen. The color drained from her face, leaving her makeup looking stark and garish. This was her nightmare. The control was slipping. The narrative was shattering. Leo dropped the microphone. It hit the wooden stage with a deafening thud, followed by a high-pitched screech of feedback that made everyone cover their ears. Leo turned to walk away, and then the mask fell off completely. Tiffany lunged. She did not think. She reacted with the primal, a vicious instinct of a cornered animal. She grabbed Leo's arm as he tried to pass her. I saw her fingers, tipped with those long, French manicured nails, dig into the soft flesh of his bicep. I saw the fabric of his linen suit bunch up under the force of her grip. You ungrateful little brat, she snarled. It was a whisper, meant only for him, but the microphone was lying on the floor of the stage, right next to their feet, and the sound system was excellent. You ungrateful little brat. The words boomed through the speakers, distorted but unmistakable. I will ruin you, she hissed. I will send you to boarding school so fast you will not even have time to pack. Read the damn letter. Leo yelped in pain. Let go of me. I was already moving. I did not run. I flew. I crossed the distance between the pergola and the stage in seconds, my heels sinking into the soft grass. I vaulted up the stairs. Mark was still standing in the front row, his mouth hanging open, a glass of scotch halfway to his lips. He was useless. He was a statue of incompetence. I reached the center of the stage just as Tiffany raised her other hand, looking like she might actually strike him. I shoved myself between them. I grabbed Tiffany's wrist, the one digging into my son's arm, and I twisted it hard. Let him go, I said. My voice was low, lethal. Tiffany gasped. Releasing Leo, she stumbled back in her high heels, catching herself on the microphone stand. She looked at me, her eyes wild, her chest heaving. Then she looked at the audience. 50 people were staring at her in horror. The grandparents, the business partners, the neighbors. They had seen the grip. They had heard the threat. Tiffany blinked, and I watched the computer in her brain try to reboot. She tried to summon the tears. She tried to crumple into the victim pose. Oh my God, she sobbed, bringing her hands to her face. He, Saoyu Tsinghaoling, 2 hashes greater than he pushed me. Anna, why are you attacking me? But it was too late. The silence in the garden was not sympathetic. It was cold. It was judgmental. I turned my back on her. I did not care about her tears. I did not care about the scene. I looked at Leo. He was clutching his arm. There were 5 red crescents beginning to form on his skin where her nails had pierced him. Are you okay? I asked. He nodded, his eyes wide. He looked shocked by his own bravery. Get Sarah, I said. Leo grabbed his sister's hand. Sarah was crying silently, tears ruining the makeup Tiffany had forced her to wear. We are leaving, I announced. I did not ask for permission. I grabbed Leo's other arm and guided them toward the stairs. Mark finally woke up. He scrambled onto the stage, his face purple with embarrassment. Anna, you cannot just take them. This is my weekend. This is my father's party. I spun around to face him. Your wife just physically assaulted our son. Mark, I said. I pointed to the red marks on Leo's arm, which were already turning into a bruise. Look at it. Look at what she did. Mark looked at the arm. Then he looked at Tiffany, who was now weeping theatrically into a napkin. She was just trying to calm him down. Mark shouted, desperate to salvage the illusion. Leo was being disrespectful. He ruined the speech. I laughed. It was a dark, humorless sound. The speech was a lie. Mark, and if you think I am leaving my children with a woman who threatens them on a hot mic, you are more delusional than she is. I turned to the crowd. I made eye contact with Mark's mother, the matriarch who had always thought I was not good enough for her son. She was clutching her pearls, staring at Tiffany with a look of absolute revulsion. Happy birthday, I said flatly. I walked my children through the garden, past the frozen waiters, past the shock and the whispers. As we reached the edge of the patio, I heard Tiffany's voice rising in a shriek behind us. They are lying. She made them do it. She brainwashed them, but no one was comforting her. I could hear the awkward shuffling of feet. I could hear the murmur of doubt. We walked out the front gate to my car. I unlocked the doors and ushered them inside. Leo sat in the front seat. He was shaking now, the adrenaline wearing off. I checked his arm again. The skin was broken. A tiny bead of blood welled up. I am sorry. Mom, he whispered. I ruined everything. I reached out and cupped his face. My hands were steady. You did not ruin anything. Leo, I said fiercely. You told the truth. You were brave, braver than your father has ever been in his life. I started the car. As we pulled away from the mansion, I looked in the rearview mirror. I saw Mark standing in the driveway, watching us leave. He looked small. He looked defeated, but I did not feel triumphant. My chest felt tight. Tiffany had crossed a line today. She had moved from psychological manipulation to physical aggression. She had been humiliated publicly, and a narcissist with a wounded ego is the most dangerous creature on earth. She would not just be angry, she would be apocalyptic. I drove down the winding road, the eucalyptus trees casting long, dark shadows over the car. The war had shifted. It was no longer a battle for custody. It was a battle for survival. And as I drove, I realized something terrifying. She had nothing left to lose, and that meant she was capable of anything. The Friday night lights of the high school football stadium hummed with an electric, artificial buzz that set my teeth on edge. It was the semi-final game for the varsity soccer team, and the air smelled of damp grass, popcorn, and the collective anxiety of 300 suburban parents. I sat alone on the top row of the metal bleachers. The aluminum was cold against my legs. I had chosen this spot for its strategic advantage. From here, I could see the entire field where Leo was warming up in his jersey. Number 17. I could see the parking lot. I could see the entrance gate. After the disaster at the birthday party 5 days ago, I had filed for an emergency restraining order. But the family court system in California moves at the speed of a glacier. We were in a limbo period, a terrifying gray zone where the law had not yet caught up to the reality of the danger. My lawyer, Robert, had advised me to keep a low profile. He told me to avoid engagement, but I was done hiding. I watched Leo down on the field. He looked different than he had a week ago. He was not goofing around with his teammates. He was stretching with a grim intensity. His eyes focused on the turf. The bruise on his arm from Tiffany's grip had faded to a sickly yellow, but the psychological mark was still fresh. He scanned the stands every few minutes, checking to see if she was here. I checked too. My eyes swept the parking lot like a searchlight. The game began. The referee blew the whistle, a sharp shriek that cut through the cool night air. For the first 20 minutes, it was peaceful. I allowed myself to relax. Just a fraction. I cheered when Leo made a clean tackle. I clapped when the team advanced the ball. I almost forgot that I was a woman under siege. Then, I saw the heads turning. It started in the lower bleachers, near the 50-yard line, where the parents of the starters usually sat. A ripple of whispers moved through the crowd. People were pointing toward the entrance gate. I saw Mrs. Gable, the Parent-Teacher Association president, cover her mouth with her hand. I followed their gaze. My stomach dropped, not with fear, but with a heavy, sickening recognition. Tiffany had arrived. She did not just walk in. She made an entrance. She was wearing a custom-made jersey with Team Leo sequined across the chest in glittery gold letters. She wore white, skinny jeans and stilettos that sank into the gravel track surrounding the field. But it was what she was carrying that sucked the oxygen out of the stadium. She and Mark were holding a banner. It was 6 feet long, painted on a white bedsheet. "We love our son Leo. Go number 17. Love, Dad and Mom, Tiff." It was grotesque. It was a performance of love so desperate and tone-deaf that it bordered on obscene. After she had dug her nails into his arm, after she had threatened him, she was here playing the role of the superfan. Mark looked miserable, holding his end of the sheet, his head ducked low, but Tiffany was beaming. She waved to the crowd as if she were the homecoming queen. She was trying to overwrite the narrative of the birthday party. She was trying to force the public to see a happy, supportive family unit. I stood up. The metal bench clanged beneath me. I looked down at the field. Leo had stopped running. He was standing near the sideline, staring at the banner. I saw his shoulders slump. I saw the humiliation radiate off him in waves. His teammates were nudging him, laughing, pointing at the spectacle. That was it. Something inside me snapped. It was not a loud snap. It was the quiet, final click of a lock engaging. I did not run. I walked down the metal steps of the bleachers with a steady, rhythmic cadence. Clang, clang, clang. People turned to look at me. They saw the expression on my face. The whispers stopped. The crowd parted. They knew who I was. They knew who she was. They sensed the collision coming. I reached the bottom of the stands and stepped onto the track. Tiffany saw me coming. Her smile faltered for a second, then widened into something manic. She nudged Mark. They walked toward me, holding the banner like a shield. "Anna," she called out, her voice pitching high to be heard over the crowd. "So glad you made it. Is not it a beautiful night for a game?" She was trying to normalize this. She was betting that I would be too polite to cause a scene in public. She was betting on my social conditioning as a well-behaved woman. She bet wrong. I walked straight up to them. I did not stop until I was 2 feet away. I could smell her perfume. It was cloying, masking the scent of the gin I suspected she had consumed before coming here. "Take it down," I said. My voice was not loud. It was flat. It was the voice of a judge delivering a sentence. Tiffany blinked, batting her false eyelashes. "Excuse me? We are just supporting our son." "Anna, why do you have to be so negative? He is not your son," I said. "And after what you did to him on Sunday, you do not get to come here and pretend you care about him. You are embarrassing him. Look at him." I pointed to the field. Leo had turned his back to the stands. He was refusing to play. The coach was talking to him, looking concerned. Tiffany did not look at Leo. She looked at the crowd in the stands, checking her audience. "You are alienating him." "Anna," she said loudly, projecting for the listeners in the front row. "You are poisoning him against us. We have a right to be here." "Mark has rights." Mark shifted uncomfortably. "Anna, let us just watch the game." He mumbled, "Do not make a scene." I ignored him. I took a step closer to Tiffany. I invaded her personal space. "I know," I said. Tiffany froze. Her smile stayed plastered on her face, but her eyes narrowed. "You know what?" she hissed, dropping the volume so only I could hear. "You know that you are a bitter, lonely woman who cannot keep a husband?" I leaned in. I spoke directly into her ear, my voice a whisper that carried the weight of a guillotine blade. "I know about Tiffany Vance," I said. I felt her body go rigid. It was like touching a statue. "I know about Las Vegas," I continued, ticking the items off on my fingers. "I know about the $450,000 in gambling debts you left behind at Caesar's Palace. I know about the check fraud charge in Henderson, Nevada." Tiffany pulled back. Her face had gone the color of chalk. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "How? Saoyuching Haling, too," she stammered. I did not stop. I was relentless. "And I know about the trust fund." "Tiffany, I know about the clause. I know you need 51% custody to access the administrative fees so you can pay off the sharks before they break your legs." I watched the realization wash over her. It was not fear. It was terror. The kind of raw, animalistic terror that comes when a predator realizes it is actually the prey. She looked at Mark. He was staring at the field, oblivious. He did not know. She had played him for a fool, and now she knew that I held the grenade pin in my hand. "You are lying," she whispered. Her voice shook. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a photocopy of her mugshot from 6 years ago. I held it up, just for a second, just long enough for her to see it. "Get out of my stadium," I said. "Get away from my son. If you ever come near my children again, I will not just go to the judge. I will go to the district attorney, and then I will go to the gambling commission." Tiffany stared at the paper. Her hands began to tremble. She dropped her end of the banner. The white sheet fluttered to the dirt, the words "Mom Tiff" crumpling into the dust. Then The narcissist in her took over. She could not leave. Leaving meant defeat. Leaving meant admitting I had power over her. Her brain, rewired by years of manipulation and entitlement, sought a third option. She screamed. It was a blood-curdling, horror movie scream that stopped the soccer game. Every player on the field froze. The referee dropped his whistle. She threw herself backward. It was a clumsy, desperate stunt. She flung her arms out and collapsed onto the gravel track, writhing as if she were in agony. "She hit me," Tiffany shrieked. She pointed a shaking finger at me. "Help. She hit me. My back. Oh God. My back." Mark dropped the banner, looking confused. "Tiff, what happened?" "She pushed me. She attacked me," Tiffany wailed, rolling on the ground, kicking her legs. "Call the police. She is crazy." I stood over her. I did not move. I did not flinch. I put my hands in my pockets. The crowd in the stands stood up. Hundreds of eyes were fixed on us, but nobody moved to help her. In the movies, the villain's lies are often believed until the very end. But in real life, people are observant. They had been watching. They had seen us talking. They had seen that I never touched her. I looked around the stadium. I saw the faces of the other mothers. I saw Mrs. Gable. I saw the soccer coach. They were not looking at me with accusation. They were looking at Tiffany with a mixture of confusion and disgust. "Get up, Tiffany," I said calmly. She kept screaming, "Call 911. She is dangerous." Mark looked at me, then at Tiffany. For the first time, I saw the fog lift from his eyes. He looked at his wife rolling in the dirt, ruining her white jeans, screaming about an assault that clearly had not happened. He looked at the mugshot I was still holding in my hand. "What is that?" Mark asked. I handed the paper to him. "Ask her," I said. Mark looked at the photo. He looked at the name, Tiffany Vance. He looked down at the woman on the ground. Tiffany saw him holding the paper. The screaming stopped instantly. It was as if someone had cut the power cord. She sat up. Her hair was messy, stuck to her lip gloss. The performance was over. "Mark," she said. Her voice was small. "That is Saoyutsinhaling. 2 hashes greater than that is Photoshop." She made that up. Mark stared at her. He looked at the banner in the dirt. He looked at the debt collectors calling his house that she had told him were telemarketers. The pieces were clicking into place. "You told me you were an interior designer," Mark said. His voice was hollow. "You told me you had a trust fund." "I do." Tiffany scrambled to her feet, dusting off her jeans. "Mark, listen to me. She is trying to break us up. She is jealous." Mark took a step back from her. I looked at Tiffany. "The show is over," I said. I turned my back on them. I walked toward the field. I walked to the sideline where Leo was standing. He was gripping the chain-link fence, his knuckles white. He had seen everything. I put my hand through the fence and squeezed his fingers. "It is okay," I said. "Play the game." Leo looked at me. He looked at Tiffany, who was now pulling at Mark's arm, frantically whispering. While Mark tried to pull away, Leo nodded. He took a deep breath. He turned back to the field and jogged into position. I turned around and walked back to the bleachers. I climbed the metal steps. Clang, clang, clang. Every eye was on me. But this time, I did not feel exposed. I felt armored. I sat down in my seat at the top of the stands, down on the track. The argument between Mark and Tiffany was escalating. Mark was shouting now. He threw the banner into a trash can. Tiffany was crying, but these were real tears. Tears of frustration. Tears of a con artist whose long con had just imploded. Finally, Mark turned and walked toward the parking lot alone. Tiffany stood there for a moment, abandoned in the glow of the stadium lights. She looked up at me. Our eyes met across the distance. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I just watched her, her face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. It was a look that promised violence. It was a look that said, "This is not over. If I cannot have the money, I will burn the house down." She turned and ran after Mark, her high heels clicking frantically on the asphalt. I took a deep breath of the cool night air. The game resumed. The crowd cheered. I sat perfectly still. I had won the battle. I had exposed her in front of the community and, more importantly, to Mark. But as I watched the taillights of their car disappear into the darkness, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. A cornered rat does not surrender. It bites. I knew what was coming next. She had lost her reputation. She had lost her hold on Mark. She had lost her shot at the easy money. She was desperate now, and a desperate woman with a history of fraud and a sociopathic lack of empathy was capable of anything. I reached into my purse and checked the pepper spray attached to my keychain. I would need to change the locks tonight. I would need to keep the children home from school on Monday. The confrontation was over. The siege was about to begin. I watched Leo score a goal. The crowd erupted. I clapped, but my eyes never left the gate. The legal system is a blunt instrument. It does not care about truth. It cares about procedure. It does not care about nuance. It cares about documentation. And Tiffany Vance, or whatever she was calling herself today, knew how to weaponize that bureaucracy better than anyone I had ever met. 2 days after the incident at the soccer stadium, the retaliation arrived. It came in the form of a heavy, authoritative knock on my front door at 7 in the morning. I was in the kitchen, making oatmeal for the children, who I had kept home from school for mental health days. The sound of the knock made the spoon freeze in my hand. I knew that knock. It was not a friend. It was not a delivery driver. I opened the door to find a uniformed sheriff's deputy standing on my porch. Behind him, the suburban street was waking up. A neighbor was walking a golden retriever, pausing to stare. "Anna Miller?" the deputy asked. He held a thick envelope. "Sao Yu Ting Hao Ling. Kettu?" "Yes, you are being served. Temporary restraining order and a notice of emergency custody hearing." I took the envelope. My hands did not shake. I had expected this. A narcissist who has been publicly humiliated does not retreat. She scorches the earth. I closed the door and opened the paperwork on the kitchen island. I read the accusations. They were breathtaking in their audacity. Petitioner Tiffany Miller alleges that respondent Anna Miller has engaged in a campaign of parental alienation, emotional abuse, and harassment. Petitioner alleges that respondent is abusing prescription narcotics and is mentally unstable, posing an immediate threat to the safety of the minor children. Petitioner requests full physical custody and supervised visitation for the mother. I let out a low, humorless laugh. She was projecting. Every single thing she accused me of was a confession of her own sins. She was the one popping pills. She was the one unstable, but she had filed first. In the eyes of the court, the person who files first controls the narrative until proven otherwise. An hour later, the second wave hit. A gray sedan pulled into my driveway. A woman in a sensible beige suit stepped out, carrying a clipboard. Child Protective Services. This was the nuclear option. Tiffany had called the hotline. She had probably used a fake name. Or perhaps she had been bold enough to use her own, sobbing about how she feared for the children's lives. I opened the door before she could knock. "Mrs. Miller? I am Cynthia Davis from the Department of Social Services. I received a report concerning the welfare of Leo and Sarah Miller. I need to come in and speak with you and the children." I stepped aside. "Please, come in," I said. My voice was calm. My house was immaculate. There were no dirty dishes in the sink. The air smelled of cinnamon, oatmeal, and coffee. I was dressed in slacks and a blouse, looking every inch the responsible professional. Cynthia Davis looked around, her eyes scanning for red flags. Hoarding, drug paraphernalia, empty liquor bottles. She found only a sterile, organized home. We sat at the dining room table. She opened her laptop. "The report alleges that you have been erratic," Cynthia began, watching my face closely. "It states that you caused a public scene at a school sporting event and that you have been poisoning the children's minds against their stepmother. It also mentions Xiaoyuting Ling. 2# is greater than substance abuse." I folded my hands on the table. "I do not drink to excess, and I do not take drugs." I said, "I am happy to submit to a hair follicle test right now if you have a kit." Cynthia blinked. Most parents became defensive or angry. My willingness to cooperate threw her off script. "That may not be necessary yet," she said, "but I do need to address the alienation claims. The report says you forced your son to humiliate his stepmother in public." I reached for my laptop. I anticipated this. "Miss Davis, before you talk to the children, I would like you to listen to something." I opened the folder labeled "The Demolition." "This is a recording from a device that Tiffany Miller sewed into the lining of my son's backpack without his knowledge or consent," I said. "I found it 2 weeks ago." I pressed play. The sound of the birthday party filled the dining room, the ambient noise of the crowd, the feedback of the microphone, and then Tiffany's voice, sharp and vicious. "You ungrateful little brat. I will ruin you. I will send you to boarding school so fast, you will not even have time to pack. Read the damn letter." Cynthia Davis stopped typing. She looked at the laptop speakers, then back at me. I played the next file. This one was from the backpack recorder, captured in Mark's car. "Do you want custody or not? We need proof that she is unfit. We need her to sound crazy." I let the silence stretch after the audio ended. "I am not the one abusing these children, Miss Davis," I said softly. "I am the one protecting them from a woman who sees them as a paycheck. The person who called you is a woman with a criminal record for fraud in Nevada, who is currently trying to access the Children's Trust Fund." I slid the private investigator's report across the table. Cynthia picked it up. She read the charges. She read the debt totals. Her posture changed. She closed her laptop. She looked at me not as a suspect, but as a witness. "Can you send me these files?" she asked. Immediately. The investigation did not last long after that. She spoke to Leo and Sarah for 10 minutes. They were polite, well-spoken, and honest. They told her about the banner. They told her about the forced Mom Tiff nickname. They told her they were scared of her. When Cynthia left, she shook my hand. "I will be submitting my report to the court before your hearing," she said. "I think the judge will find it very illuminating." I watched her drive away. I had survived the assault on my home, but the assault on my reputation was just beginning. I opened my phone to check the neighborhood Facebook group. I knew I should not, but I had to know the temperature of the water. The Hidden Hills community page was usually a boring feed of lost cats and complaints about trash pickup. Today, it was a war zone. someone had posted a video of the incident at the soccer game. It showed Tiffany throwing herself on the ground, screaming about a phantom assault. It showed me standing over her, calm and untouched. The comments were brutal. Is that Mark Miller's new wife? She looks completely unhinged. I was there. Anna never touched her. That woman is a psycho. My cousin in Las Vegas says she looks like a woman who scammed a casino dealer 3 years ago. The tide had turned. For months, Tiffany had played the victim, painting me as the bitter ex-wife. But the camera does not lie. The community had seen the mask slip, but the real blow came later that afternoon. I was watering the garden in the front yard when a white van pulled up to the curb. It was not a delivery truck. It had the logo of a foreclosure processing company on the side. A man in a reflective vest walked up the driveway of Mark's house across town. I knew this because my friend Linda, who lived 2 doors down from Mark, texted me the play-by-play. Anna, the text read, "They are putting a sign up at Mark's house." I felt a pang of pity, not for Mark, but for the wreckage of what we once had. Mark had not paid the mortgage in 4 months. Tiffany had likely intercepted the notices. She had probably told him she was handling the bills with her investment dividends. Now, the secret was out on the lawn for the whole world to see. Notice of default, auction pending. The rumors spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. The woman who had bragged about her wealth, who had tried to shame me for my budget lifestyle, was being evicted. I went back inside and sat on the couch. The silence in the house felt heavy. I had won the battle of public opinion. The Child Protective Services case would likely be closed in my favor. The restraining order she filed would be thrown out once the judge heard the tapes, but I did not feel happy. I felt exhausted. My phone rang. It was Mark. I stared at the screen. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but I needed to know if he was safe. Despite everything, he was the father of my children. I answered, "Saoyuting Haling. Twana?" His voice was broken. It sounded like he had been crying for hours. "She is gone." Mark whispered. "Who is gone?" I asked, though I knew. "Tiffany. She took the car. She took the jewelry. Saoyuting Haling. Tuhash is greater than she emptied the joint checking account." I closed my eyes. Of course she did. The moment the con collapsed, the grifter cut her losses and ran. She had realized at the soccer game that the gig was up. She knew I had the evidence. She knew the trust fund was out of reach, so she stripped the carcass and fled. "I am sorry, Mark," I said, and I meant it. "I am ruined." "Anna," he sobbed. "The bank is taking the house. I have credit card bills for $50,000 I did not even know existed. She forged my signature. You need to call the police." "Mark," I said, "file a report. It is the only way to clear your name of the debt." "I cannot," he choked out. "I feel so stupid. Everyone knows. Everyone saw her at the game. I let her near our kids. God. Anna, I let her drug Sarah with that peanut bar. Did not I?" He finally admitted it. "Yes, Mark, you did." I hung up the phone. I sat in the darkening living room. The victory was absolute. The enemy had fled the field. The truth was out, but the cost was high. My children's father was a broken man. Their inheritance from their grandfather was safe, but their sense of security was shattered. I looked out the window. The sun was setting over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of violet and gray. The storm had passed, but now I had to walk through the debris and see what could be salvaged. I stood up and went to the kitchen to start dinner. I chopped vegetables with a rhythmic, steady cadence. Chop, chop, Chop. I was a landscape architect. I knew that after a fire, the soil is rich. Things can grow again. But first, you have to clear away the ash. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Leo and Sarah came into the kitchen. They looked cautious, scanning my face for signs of stress. Is everything okay? Mom? Leo asked. I put down the knife. I looked at them. Everything is going to be fine, I said, and for the first time in months, I actually believed it. She was gone. The monster under the bed had packed her bags, but I knew the scars she left would take longer to fade than the bruise on Leo's arm. The rain in Southern California is not like the rain in other places. It does not drizzle. It arrives with the violence of a sudden assault, turning the dry, dusty earth into slick mud. That night, the storm battered the roof of my bungalow like 1,000 tiny hammers. The wind howled through the canyons, rattling the window panes in their frames. I sat in the armchair in the corner of the living room, staring at the front door. The house was dark, save for the occasional flash of lightning that illuminated the room in stark, blue-white relief. My phone sat on the armrest. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. I had not slept. A primal instinct, the same one that wakes a mother seconds before her baby cries, kept my eyes wide open. I knew Tiffany was out there. The police had not found her yet. She had drained Mark's accounts, maxed out his credit cards, and vanished into the sprawl of Los Angeles County. But a creature like that does not run away when there is still meat on the bone. She was cornered. It's broke, and facing prison time for identity fraud. She needed a bargaining chip, and I knew exactly what that chip was. Upstairs, Leo and Sarah were sleeping. I had double-checked the locks. I had set the alarm system to its highest sensitivity. I had placed a canister of pepper spray on the side table next to my wine glass. Then I heard it. It was not the wind. It was the distinct, crunching sound of tempered glass shattering. The noise came from the kitchen at the back of the house. I did not scream. Panic is a luxury I could not afford. I stood up, my movements silent and fluid. I grabbed the pepper spray. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of adrenaline, but my hands were steady. I moved to the bottom of the staircase. I had to hold the line. I could not let her get upstairs. A shadow moved in the hallway. A flash of lightning lit up the corridor. And for a second, I saw her. Tiffany stood in the entryway to the kitchen. She looked like a wraith. Her expensive clothes were soaked through, clinging to her skeletal frame. Her blonde hair was matted against her skull. The makeup was gone, stripped away by the rain to reveal a face that was hollow, desperate, and terrifyingly old. She was holding a kitchen knife. It was one of mine, an 8-inch chef's knife she must have grabbed from the butcher block. She saw me. "Anna," she croaked. Her voice was unrecognizable. It sounded like grinding stones. "Get out of my house," I said. My voice was low. I did not want to wake the children. I wanted to end this in the dark. "I need them," she whispered. Taking a step forward, the knife glinted in the gloom. "I need the papers. Anna, you have to sign the papers. If I have custody, the bank cannot touch me. The trust fund protects the guardian." I checked the laws. She was delusional. She was rewriting legal codes in her head to suit her madness. "There is no trust fund for you, Tiffany," I said. "It is over. The police are on their way." The alarm was silent. "But it has been triggered. Liar," she shrieked. The sound shattered the silence of the house. Upstairs, I heard a thud. Leo was awake. Tiffany lunged. She moved faster than I expected, fueled by the hysterical strength of the doomed. She rushed at me, the knife raised high. I raised the pepper spray canister. I aimed for her eyes and pressed the trigger. A stream of orange liquid shot out, hitting her square in the face. She screamed, a guttural, animalistic sound of pain. But momentum carried her forward. She crashed into me. We went down hard onto the hardwood floor. The knife skittered away, sliding under the sofa. Her hands were everywhere. She was clawing at my face, pulling my hair. She smelled of rain and cheap vodka and old sweat. It was the smell of rot. Give them to me, she screamed, spitting in my face. You ruined everything, you jealous witch. I earned that money. I put up with your idiot husband for 2 years. I earned it. I struggled to push her off. She was light, but she was possessed by fury. Her fingernails dug into my neck. Drawing blood, I brought my knee up, driving it hard into her stomach. She gasped, the air leaving her lungs in a wheeze. Her grip loosened. I rolled her over, pinning her to the floor. I was heavier than her. I was stronger than her. I was a mother defending her nest. Stay down, I shouted. Suddenly, the front door burst open. A beam of blinding white light cut through the darkness. Police? Drop it. Show me your hands. 2 officers stormed into the room, their weapons drawn. Rain blew in behind them, soaking the entryway. I rolled off Tiffany and held my hands up. She is the intruder, I yelled. She has a knife. The officers descended on Tiffany. She was still thrashing, clawing at her burning eyes, screaming incoherently. My eyes. She blinded me. Arrest her. She is stealing my children. They forced her onto her stomach. I heard the metallic click of handcuffs ratcheting tight. It took 2 men to drag her up. She was kicking and spitting. Her face, a mask of orange dye and red swollen rage. I want my lawyer. I want the trust fund. It is mine. Mark said it was mine. I stood up, leaning against the wall for support. My shirt was torn. My neck was bleeding. My knees were shaking so hard I thought I would collapse. Leo and Sarah were at the top of the stairs. They were huddled together, eyes wide with terror, watching the scene unfold below. Go back to your rooms, I commanded, my voice cracking. Do not look. But they looked. They saw the woman who had tried to buy their love being dragged out the door like a rabid dog. As the officers hauled her out into the rain, Tiffany twisted her head back to look at me. Her eyes were swollen shut, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the pepper spray. You will never be free of me, she screamed. I will sue you. I will take everything. Then the door slammed shut. The silence that followed was deafening. I sank to the floor. The adrenaline crashed, leaving me cold and empty. A third officer, a younger woman, stepped forward and knelt beside me. Ma'am, are you injured? Do you need an ambulance? I touched my neck. My fingers came away red. I am fine, I whispered. Just Saoudingha Ling. 2 hashes greater than get her away from here. I looked up at the stairs. Leo was coming down. He was holding a baseball bat. He stepped over the mess on the floor and sat beside me. He did not say a word. He just put his arm around my shoulders and held me. Sarah came down a moment later. She buried her face in my chest, sobbing quietly. I held them both. We sat there on the floor of the hallway, listening to the sirens fade into the distance. The threat was gone. The nightmare was over. But as I looked at the scratches on my arms and felt the phantom weight of Tiffany's body pressing down on me, I knew that this moment would stay with us forever. We had won. We had survived. But innocence is a currency you can only spend once. And tonight, Tiffany had forced us to empty the account. I kissed the top of Sarah's head. I squeezed Leo's hand. "It is over," I said, but even as I said it, I wondered if the echo of her scream would ever truly leave this house. 6 months is a long time in the life of a garden, but a short time in the life of a family. The seasons had changed. The scorching heat of the Santa Ana winds had given way to the cool, crisp mornings of November. The jacaranda trees in my front yard had dropped their purple blooms, leaving the ground covered in a carpet of color that was slowly turning to brown dust. I stood on the front porch of my bungalow, wrapping my cardigan tighter around my chest. Across the street, a moving van was parked. Life in the neighborhood was moving on. A gray sedan pulled up to the curb. It was a 10-year-old model, dented on the passenger side door. The engine sputtered and died with a wheeze. Mark stepped out. He looked like a man who had been erased. The arrogance that had defined him during his marriage to Tiffany was gone, scrubbed away by the harsh grit of reality. He had lost the McMansion to foreclosure 3 months ago. He had lost his job shortly after the scandal broke. When his company decided that having an employee whose wife was involved in a high-profile fraud case was bad for business, he was now living in a studio apartment in El Cajon, 40 minutes east, working sales at a mid-range electronics store. He walked up the driveway, his shoulders hunched. He was holding a small plastic bag. "Here are the cleats," Mark said. He did not meet my eyes. "Leo left them in my car last weekend." "Thank you." "To Mark," I said. I took the bag. He lingered. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, looking at the flower beds I had recently replanted. "The garden looks good." "Anna," he said. I nodded. "It is coming along." There was a silence between us. It was not the angry silence of the divorce, nor the terrified silence of the Tiffany era. It was the heavy, awkward silence of two people who share children, but nothing else. "I am sorry, Anna," he said suddenly. His voice was thick. "I know I have said it 100 times, but I was so stupid. I let her. Sao Yu Tsing Hao Ling. 2 hashes greater than I let her almost destroy us." I looked at him. I looked at the lines around his eyes, the gray in his beard that had not been there a year ago. I used to pray for this moment. In the darkest nights of our divorce, when I was angry and bitter, I wanted him to suffer. I wanted him to be humiliated. I wanted him to come crawling back so I could have the satisfaction of slamming the door in his face. But now that he was here, broken and begging, I felt nothing. The satisfaction I thought I would feel was absent. Instead, there was just a dull, practical pity. "You were stupid, Mark," I said. I was not going to sugarcoat it. "You let your ego drive the car, and you drove it off a cliff." "I know," he whispered. "Can you ever forgive me?" I looked past him, toward the window where Leo and Sarah were eating breakfast. "I do not know," I said honestly. "Forgiveness is expensive, Mark, and you are overdrawn. But for the sake of the kids, we will be civil. That is the best I can offer you." He nodded, accepting the crumbs. It was more than he deserved. I watched him walk back to his dented car. He looked small. He looked like a ghost of the man I had married. As I walked back into the house, a strange realization settled over me. I had spent years blaming Mark for everything. I had spent years telling myself I was the perfect parent, the martyr. But the truth was sharper than that. Before Tiffany arrived, I had been bitter. I had let my hatred for Mark seep into the walls of this house. I had made comments, rolled my eyes, and subtly encouraged the children to disrespect him. I had called it protecting them, but it was really just alienation by another name. It took a monster like Tiffany to show me what true evil looked like. She held up a mirror to my own controlling nature. She showed me that gripping something too tight does not save it. It suffocates it in a twisted, horrifying way. She had saved us. She had forced me to stop fighting Mark and start fighting for my children. She had forced Leo and Sarah to see the truth on their own, without me whispering it in their ears. I walked into the kitchen. "Finish up, guys," I said. "We are going to be late for school." Leo grabbed his backpack. Sarah put her bowl in the dishwasher. They moved with a lightness that had been missing for a long time. They were healing. The nightmares had stopped. The flinching had stopped. We got into the car. I backed out of the driveway and headed down the hill. Our route to school took us past the gated community where Mark and Tiffany used to live. As we approached the entrance, the kids went quiet. It was a reflex. I slowed the car down as we passed the house. The iron gates were closed. A large sign was zip-tied to the front pillars. Bank owned. Auction pending. No trespassing. The grass was overgrown. The fountain was dry. The windows were dark and empty. It was just a house. It was just wood and stucco and glass. The malice that had lived inside it was gone, locked away in a cell in the county jail, awaiting trial for identity theft, fraud, and child endangerment. I looked in the rearview mirror. Leo was looking at the house. He did not look scared. He looked indifferent. He turned his head and said something to Sarah, and she laughed. I pressed the accelerator. The house disappeared behind us, shrinking in the mirror until it was just a speck. And then it was gone. I turned the radio on. A pop song filled the car. I kept my eyes on the road ahead. The traffic was heavy. The sun was bright, and the path forward was clear. I would never forget what happened. I would never stop checking the locks at night. I would never stop scanning the crowd at soccer games. But I was no longer driving with the parking brake on. I smiled, just a little. We made it.